to that breaking news tonight. A man has been taken to hospital with serious injuries after multiple people have been stabbed on a train in Huntington, Cambridgeshire, of course. And we've got some new footage to show you that we believe is from the scene.
You know it's bad when citizens stop dialing 999 and start forming patrols. When the streets of a G7 country start resembling conflict zones. When the words Machete attack are no longer shocking, just routine. That's where Britain is right now. The numbers alone paint a picture of freefall. Over 53,000 knife attacks annually, an attack every 10 minutes. Machete violence up 320% since the year 2000. Hospitals across the country are overwhelmed with victims, with tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now. It's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles a mainstream media might miss, like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting. Emergency services are buckling, and ordinary people are being told to stay vigilant, stay indoors, and, in some cases, be kind. Because apparently, the state's answer to all this is a kindness workshop. While armed gangs are roaming public spaces, the government priority has been to censor information and soften the optics rather than confront the reality. Their strategy? Scrub suspect identities, blur footage, hide demographic data to avoid upsetting community relations. But who's protecting the public from the actual violence? This isn't about keeping the peace anymore. It's about keeping a lid on the truth. And that truth is simple. The government is no longer able or willing to enforce law and order on its own streets. We're talking about entire urban zones where law enforcement has effectively withdrawn. Police officers, limited by political oversight and under pressure from every angle, are retreating from areas that have become too dangerous to patrol. In their absence, chaos moves in. Gangs fill the void. Protests turn into riots. Hotels and migrant centers have been set on fire. Leeds, London, Manchester, cities once viewed as symbols of stability, are becoming ungovernable in real time. And it's not just happening in the shadows. The public sees it, feels it, and increasingly they are being forced to act, with the police unable to respond effectively, and trust in the justice system fading fast. People are turning to illegal means to protect themselves. Defensive sprays, banned in the UK, are now being bought through black market channels. Neighborhood patrol groups are forming, quietly, in towns and cities, as locals start taking security into their own hands. It's not just desperation. It's survival. This is what happens when the rule of law erodes. When early release schemes like SDS-40 dump over 40,000 reoffenders back onto the streets in a single year, all because the prisons are full. When that same prison system is at 99% capacity, overcrowded with foreign nationals. I know things feel really heavy in the UK right now. There's a lot of division and noise on the streets, but I want this channel to be a place where we can come together. If you want to be part of a supportive community, please subscribe. And like this video to show some love to everyone feeling anxious about the state of things right now. Stay safe out there, everyone. And unable to absorb the consequences of lenient sentencing policies. The result? A justice system without deterrence, and communities left to fend for themselves. The cycle is broken. Crime goes up. Prisons overflow. Offenders are released early. Violence rises. Trust collapses. And then there's a political class, still clinging to cosmetic solutions and empty rhetoric. Leaders like Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage offer nothing but band-aids, banning zombie knives while illegal weapons flood the streets anyway, ignoring border security even as the system strains under the weight of uncontrolled migration. Everything's performative. No one's actually solving the root problem. Meanwhile, protests are erupting. Thousands are pouring into the streets not just in anger, but in raw frustration. In cities like London and Leeds, protesters have openly called for mass deportations. They are not whispering it. They are demanding it loudly because they see a government more invested in public image than public safety. And when these protests turn violent, riots, clashes with police, state buildings targeted, fires in the streets. But instead of grappling with why the public is this angry, the authorities retreat into censorship, hide the stats, mute the coverage, pretend the chaos isn't spreading. But it is, And it's not just on the streets. The economy is feeling it too. Foreign investors are backing away from Britain. Safety concerns are becoming part of financial risk assessments. International reputation fading fast. Wealthy families are moving their money. You've seen the headlines, but the atmosphere down here is completely different. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw footage I'm releasing later this week, and like this video to help push this unfiltered reporting up the algorithm. And sometimes at homes, elsewhere, because who wants to live or invest in a country where the state can't guarantee safety in its capital city? This isn't just a crime wave. This is a legitimacy crisis. The idea of Britain as a safe, well-governed democracy is coming apart. And it's not being torn down from the outside. It's collapsing from within, from a state that has failed to act, failed to protect, and failed to lead. And at the center of it all, mistrust. People don't believe the numbers. They don't trust the police. They don't trust the politicians. And they certainly don't trust the media, which too often avoids reporting the full story under the guise of social responsibility. But suppressing information doesn't prevent unrest. It causes it, with tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now. It's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles the mainstream media might miss, like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting. Because when the truth is hidden, people fill in the gaps themselves. And that leads to suspicion, division, and dangerous assumptions, none of which get addressed, because acknowledging them would mean admitting the state has failed. You can't lie your way out of a crisis like this. And you can't PR spin your way through a collapse in public safety. But that's all the leadership has done. The British public is tired. And when they stop believing that order will be restored, they don't wait. They act. That's why we're seeing more people turn to vigilante behavior. Not because they want to, because they no longer see an alternative. The social contract has been broken. The understanding that if you follow the law, the state will protect you, that's gone. Now, it's every neighborhood for itself, every family making its own judgment calls. Some are arming themselves, others are moving out, but what no one's doing anymore is waiting around. And the long-term consequences? They are massive. We're heading toward the balkanization of British society. Urban areas splintered into zones of unofficial control. Community justice replacing legal authority. A weakened national government that still exists in name but no longer in influence. What happens when the average citizen stops seeing the police as protectors? When the justice system is viewed as irrelevant? When the only thing keeping violence at bay is fear, and even that's starting to fade? What happens when no one expects a government to solve it anymore? That's the real danger. Because once that tipping point is reached, once people accept that the chaos is permanent, it becomes permanent. And Britain is perilously close to that edge. It's not too late, but the window is closing fast. Without immediate, aggressive reform across every level of policy, law enforcement, sentencing, immigration, transparency, this slide will not slow down. It will accelerate, and the damage will be generational. A country without order cannot function, and a country that pretends it still has order, while machete attacks happen every 10 minutes, is lying to itself. So what now? Let us know what you're seeing. Are your streets safe? Have you stopped reporting crime? Are your communities pulling away from the system? Drop a comment. Speak up while you still can. If you want more raw, unfiltered analysis of what's really happening beyond the headlines, hit like, share this with someone who needs to understand the scale of this crisis, and subscribe, because this isn't just a news story. This is a warning, and no one else is saying it out loud. And here's the part that nobody in government seems ready to admit. I know things feel really heavy in the UK right now. There's a lot of division and noise on the streets, but I want this channel to be a place where we can come together. If you want to be part of a supportive community, please subscribe. And like this video to show some love to everyone feeling anxious about the state of things right now. Stay safe out there, everyone. The fear is no longer isolated. It's spreading. It's not just people in the rougher parts of London who feel unsafe. It's not just a few unlucky communities in Leeds or Birmingham dealing with gang presence. The fear has crept into the middle class, into quiet suburbs, into places that were never supposed to be affected. Parents in respectable postcodes are now walking their kids to school with pepper spray hidden in handbags. Pubs are closing early. Train stations are empty after dark. And what's the government's response? A few PR statements, maybe a symbolic ban, and definitely less information in the crime reports. Because, as always, the priority isn't solving the problem. It's controlling the narrative. But here's the problem with that. Reality doesn't go away just because you choose to ignore it. People are watching their cities change around them, and not for the better. They are watching communities fracture along the lines of safety, wealth, and silence. The affluent have private security and gated homes. The working class have deadbolts, group chats, and hope. And the poorest? They are left with nothing but a broken promise that things will get better. They are not. Not under this leadership. Not with this strategy. You cannot enforce order with slogans. You cannot repair trust by hiding the truth. And you certainly can't protect people by telling them to be kind while machete gangs run wild. What's happened instead is a quiet withdrawal of state responsibility. And in its place, a growing sense that security, stability, and safety are now private luxuries. You've seen the headlines, but the atmosphere down here is completely different. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw footage I'm releasing later this week, and like this video to help push this unfiltered reporting up the algorithm. Not public rights. The more you zoom out, the more obvious it becomes. Public spaces, parks, bus stops, town centers are turning into hotspots of violence. Knife attacks aren't even shocking anymore. Stabbings inside schools, fights with machetes in front of shopping centers, videos circulating online of brutal beatdowns and weapons being pulled in daylight. And still, the government response is mild at best, patronizing at worst. What's actually being done? Not much. The SDS-40 early release policy continues to funnel violent offenders back into the same communities they once terrorized. The prison system is so overloaded it can't take them back. The courts are backed up, and police officers, many of whom are just trying to stay alive themselves, are told to stand down unless it's absolutely necessary. And yet, somehow, the biggest focus in policy rooms is how to prevent misinformation. Not about reducing crime, not about making neighborhoods safer, but about managing the optics of a country spiraling into chaos. If that sounds backwards, it's because it is. And while officials scramble to avoid public backlash, what do you think happens on the ground? Distrust. People no longer believe the numbers. They no longer believe the reports. When a violent crime happens and the details are scrubbed, when suspects are described in vague, sanitized terms, when CCTV footage gets blurred for legal reasons, the public fills in the blanks. And that's where division begins. Instead of transparency, we get censorship. And instead of safety, we get silence. But silence doesn't stop crime. It doesn't protect communities. It just makes the fear louder. And now, with tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now, it's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles the mainstream media might miss, like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting. That fear is turning into action. Neighborhoods are organizing outside the law. People are buying black market sprays and stun devices, not to feel powerful, but to feel less powerless. They are setting up WhatsApp groups not just to share gossip, but to track who's been stabbed this week, who's walking around with weapons, which streets to avoid, which kids have already been attacked. This is what a society looks like when it loses faith in the state, when it stops asking for help and starts assuming none is coming. And if that doesn't terrify you, it should. Because what happens when the police finally do show up, but the public no longer sees them as allies? What happens when the only people who enforce order are doing it unofficially, without oversight, without training, and without restraint? That's not law enforcement. That's the road to street justice. And when you normalize that, when you allow that kind of fractured response to become the new standard, you don't get your society back. You don't just wake up one day and say, we'll try again. That kind of trust takes generations to rebuild, if it comes back at all. And the most infuriating part? It was avoidable. This didn't have to happen. There were red flags for years. Knife crime was rising. Police budgets were shrinking. Prisons were filling up. Border control policies were becoming more performative than practical. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were screaming. But every time the public raised concern, they were met with the same tired lines. We mustn't panic. Don't let this divide us. We're stronger together. Sure, but unity doesn't come from denial. It comes from truth. And people aren't being told the truth. They are told violence is down, while their local A&D has a 3-hour wait time due to stabbing victims. They are told that crime statistics are inconclusive, while their street has seen 3 assaults this month. They are told to avoid spreading hysteria, while machetes are found in local schoolyards. At some point, the gap between what's said and what's lived becomes too big to ignore. And that's where Britain is now. There's no more benefit of the doubt. No more trust to burn. And while politicians play damage control, the damage keeps spreading. Investors are pulling out. International confidence in Britain's institutions is sinking. And the national image? Rapidly deteriorating from world leader to case study in decline. Because you can't run a modern country on vibes and vision boards. You need leadership. You need policy that works. And above all, you need honesty. I know things feel really heavy in the UK right now. There's a lot of division and noise on the streets, but I want this channel to be a place where we can come together. If you want to be part of a supportive community, please subscribe. And like this video to show some love to everyone feeling anxious about the state of things right now. Stay safe out there, everyone. Britain has none of that right now. So what happens next? If the state doesn't step in soon, others will. And they won't be democratic. They won't be accountable. They'll be violent, self-appointed, and driven by fear. And once power shifts into the hands of the unofficial, the unstable, and the untrained, it doesn't just shift back. It stays there. This is the crossroads. The question is, will the country course correct, or will it keep choosing optics over action until there's nothing left to manage? We're not talking about potential anymore. We're talking about active collapse. The drift into lawless zones isn't theory. It's fact. It's happening. It's visible. And the longer the government keeps pretending it's under control, the more irreversible this breakdown becomes. So now it's up to the public. Because waiting around clearly isn't working. Because if no one in charge is willing to say it, we will. The streets of Britain are changing forever. And not in the way anyone wanted. This isn't a temporary wave. This isn't a seasonal spike. This is systemic. It's structural. It's cultural. It's decades of political cowardice, failed leadership, and willful ignorance finally catching up fast. And now that it's here, everyone's looking around asking, how did it get this bad? The answer? It didn't get this bad. It was allowed to. And now, we're all living in the fallout. You've got a public completely disillusioned with leadership. A police force so stretched, they're being told to prioritize paperwork over patrol. You've seen the headlines, but the atmosphere down here is completely different. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw footage I'm releasing later this week, and like this video to help push this unfiltered reporting up the algorithm. Officers being investigated for excessive force more often than criminals are arrested, and policies that have quite literally put violent reoffenders back on the street without warning, because there's no more room in the cells. SDS-40 is a disaster, releasing thousands of inmates, some of them convicted of violent crimes, under the guise of managing capacity isn't just irresponsible. It's dangerous. It sends a message that even if you get caught, even if you're sentenced, even if you go to prison, you'll be out before long. And the public will just have to deal with it. What happened to consequences? What happened to deterrence? The justice system has been reduced to a suggestion box. But it's not just the criminals that feel empowered. It's the silence around them. The media won't tell the full story. Authorities won't disclose key facts. Suspects are anonymized. Reports are censored. Identities redacted. And the reason they give? To prevent social division. Except the division is already here. You can't suppress information and expect trust. You can't hide reality and expect cohesion. What you get instead is a public that starts assuming the worst, because you've trained them to read between the lines. That's not unity. That's fracture. And that fracture is growing. When communities feel abandoned, they don't rally behind the system. They build their own. That's exactly what we're seeing with the rise of vigilante patrols, neighborhood self-defense groups, and private networks replacing public services. And let's be real, most people didn't want to go down that road. They didn't want to break the law to protect their kids. But when the system refuses to do it, what choice do they have? You think they are buying black market sprays for fun? No, they are buying them because a 12-year-old was stabbed outside their kid's school and the police arrived 40 minutes late. They are forming watch groups because gangs have claimed control of the local park, and no one's done anything about it for months. They are patrolling their streets because their local MP hasn't shown up in their area since the last election campaign. This is what life looks like in a country where the people have lost faith in their own government. And that's not a metaphor. That's not exaggeration. That's Britain, right now. Meanwhile, the leadership still treats this like a PR issue, as if we're all overreacting. As if 53,000 knife attacks a year is something we just need to contextualize. As if machetes in public places are only concerning when they trend on social media. And in the rare moments where they do acknowledge the crisis, they reach for the same shallow tools. Ban zombie knives, as if criminals care what shape their weapon is. Push for more community outreach programs, as if a youth club is going to stop a teenager from joining gang when there's no jobs, no support, and no protection in his neighborhood. Blame austerity, as if 10 years of bad economics explains why police won't respond to a call until the crime is over, and sometimes not even then. It's not about funding. It's about priority. And for years, crime prevention hasn't been one. What's been prioritized instead? Optics, sensitivity, narrative control. The goal hasn't been to fix the problem. It's been to frame it better. And that's why trust is gone. Because when public institutions act like image management is more important than public safety, people notice. They notice when crimes are downplayed, when certain incidents are left unreported, when national statistics tell one story and lived experience tells another. And once that disconnect takes root, it spreads everywhere. That's why we're seeing protests turn aggressive. That's why tensions are boiling over. That's why you're hearing more people say, out loud, what used to only be whispered. People are angry. People are scared. And people are done being told that they're the problem for noticing what's right in front of them. And while all of this happens, while the foundations of social order crack and crumble, the world is watching. Investors are watching. Governments are watching. Tourists are watching. And their response is unanimous. They are backing away. Because no one wants to pour money into a country where the capital feels unsafe, where social services are strained, where local governments have lost control of their streets, where national leadership is too paralyzed by political correctness to enforce basic law and order. And that's the part that makes this even worse. It's not just about violence. It's about viability. Is Britain still a functioning state? Or is it becoming a symbolic one? A state that exists on paper, in ceremony, in parliamentary debate, but not in the lived experiences of its people. Because right now, if you ask the average person who really keeps them safe, it's not the state. It's their neighbor. It's their WhatsApp group. It's their own vigilance, their own fear, and their own refusal to become another statistic. And that is not how a modern democracy is supposed to function. You cannot outsource security to the public. You cannot ask people to obey laws you refuse to enforce. And you cannot expect trust in a system that hides its failures behind euphemisms and redactions. So where does that leave us? At a crossroads. And it's an ugly one. Down one road is full breakdown, continued censorship, rising violence, more abandoned communities, and a public that no longer even pretends to believe in the system. Down the other is radical transparency, hard decisions, and actual reform. Not performative, not symbolic, real change. That means ending the SDS-40 disaster. That means empowering police forces to actually act. That means protecting communities with real resources, not just words. That means reporting crime honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. And yes, that means facing some tough truths about immigration, about borders, about social cohesion, and about what happens when integration fails. Because ignoring those truths got us here. And continuing to ignore them will only make everything worse. The public knows it. The streets prove it. And the question now isn't whether the government is aware. It's whether it has a backbone to do anything about it. So we'll ask it again. Is Britain still governable? Or are we watching a country transition from a unified, democratic state to a patchwork of frightened communities and failing institutions? That answer isn't going to come from another press conference. It's going to come from what happens next and how long people are willing to wait. Because if we stop talking about it, they win. If we stop calling out the truth, if we just accept a curated version of events fed to us by officials more concerned with headlines and human lives, then the descent doesn't just continue, it accelerates. Let's be absolutely clear. The social contract in Britain is disintegrating. Fast. The deal used to be simple. You follow the law, pay your taxes, contribute to society, and in return, the government keeps your streets safe, your community secure, and your future protected. That deal? Torn to shreds. And what we're left with is a government that no longer governs, a police force that no longer patrols, and a public force into a form of reluctant self-reliance that nobody asked for. Not out of pride, not out of politics, out of fear. People didn't want to become the police. They didn't ask to carry black market sprays, set up night watches, or teach their kids how to spot a concealed blade. But when the government abdicates, the vacuum has to be filled. And right now, that vacuum is being filled by normal people who just want to make it home alive. That's a difference here. This isn't some fantasy of rebellion. It's survival. And still, the political establishment refuses to budge. Instead of facing the reality that over 53,000 knife attacks a year is a national emergency, that machete crime has increased by 320% since 2000, that entire communities are being forced into defensive postures just to stay afloat, they are throwing out surface-level gestures and hoping it distracts the public just long enough to avoid accountability. Ban zombie knives. Host another community forum. Talk about de-escalation. Meanwhile, someone else is bleeding out in a Tesco parking lot. The truth is, we are seeing a controlled demolition of order. Not in the sense that someone wants this chaos, but in the sense that leadership is actively choosing inaction. And in some cases, deliberate blindness. Because if they truly believed the situation was salvageable under the current approach, they'd be doing more than banning specific knife shapes and posting stay-safe infographics on Twitter. They'd be rebuilding prisons, not releasing 40,000 offenders early under the SDS-40 scheme. They'd be giving police the legal backing and manpower to patrol dangerous areas, not telling them to tiptoe around enforcement for fear of public backlash. They'd be telling the full truth about who's committing crimes, not hiding suspect backgrounds to avoid misunderstanding, while simultaneously letting that silence breed more division and resentment. And if they really cared about cohesion, they'd be working to restore trust, not erode it further with half measures and obfuscation. Instead, what do we get? A leadership vacuum, a justice system that's overloaded, underfunded, and completely undermined. A police force being told to do more with less while simultaneously being vilified for doing anything at all. And the public, watching all of it unfold, powerless, exhausted, and increasingly indifferent to the idea of cooperation. Because what's the point of cooperating with a system that doesn't protect you? What's the point of reporting a crime when you know no one's coming? What's the point of relying on institutions when they've already made it clear you're on your own? This is how societies fracture, not with one big event, but with a slow, steady erosion of trust. Trust in government, trust in law, trust in each other. And once that's gone, everything else follows. We are now seeing the early stages of de facto community rule, local power replacing national presence, informal justice replacing legal process, people organizing in WhatsApp groups, not waiting on a 999 operator. That's not efficiency. That's desperation. And once desperation becomes normalized, violence isn't a shock. It's a guarantee. And what happens when people stop trusting even each other? When fear starts driving neighbor against neighbor, you get balkanization. That's not a word you hear often in the UK, but it's exactly what's creeping in. The slow segmentation of society into clusters, geographically, culturally, economically, each operating on its own terms because the center no longer holds. Local rules, local responses, local justice. And it's not a future scenario. It's already in progress. Ask anyone living in the hardest-hit boroughs. The state doesn't exist there, not in any meaningful way. What exists is a struggle to stay one step ahead of the next act of violence. A daily game of risk assessment. A reality where safety depends not on the police, but on how well-connected your street is, how organized your neighborhood is, and how quickly you can respond when no one else will. That's not modern Britain. That's failed state logic. And the financial sector knows it, too. Foreign investment is drying up, not just because of economic uncertainty, but because of security concerns. Wealthy families are pulling out. Businesses are setting up elsewhere. The idea of London as a global financial capital is being quietly revised, not by the press, but by the people with money and with options. Because let's face it, who wants to pour capital into a country where machete gangs roam the streets and the police can't even guarantee patrol coverage in major cities? The optics alone are toxic. The substance is worse. And yet, here we are, still being told by officials that things are under control, that this is just a difficult period, that it's not as bad as it seems. But we know it's worse. We've seen the videos. We've read the reports. What little of them haven't been scrubbed or sanitized. We've seen the hesitation in public figures' eyes when they are asked direct questions and offer nothing but platitudes in return. And most of all, we've felt it. The atmosphere, the shift, the creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, the institutions we were taught to rely on are no longer functioning as advertised. And if we don't talk about it, if we let this become the new normal, then we're complicit in letting it fall apart. So don't go silent. If you live in a community that's dealing with this, say something in the comments. If your neighborhood has organized patrols or safety groups, talk about it. If you've stopped relying on police response times, or you've seen crime covered up or glossed over, share it. This is not fear-mongering. This is reality. And the worst part, they still think they have time. They still believe they can kick the can down the road, patch it with a press release, and ride out the storm while neighborhoods burn, hospitals overflow, and the public slips deeper into hopelessness. They believe the outrage will fade, that the fear will quiet, that eventually people will stop talking about it. But that's not what's happening. People aren't forgetting, they're remembering. Every incident, every failure, every time a victim was failed by the system and then buried by silence. Every time officials stood in front of cameras and promised change, only for the headlines to get worse the next week. Because when your solution to a national breakdown is waited out, you're not leading, you're hiding. And the people see it. They see the two Britons forming, the one in political speeches, full of optimism and community resilience, and the one they actually live in, where emergency services are unreachable, stabbings happen in broad daylight, and the state seems more interested in monitoring speech than crime. This isn't about panic. It's about facts. 53,000 knife attacks a year is a fact. A 320% increase in machete incidents since 2000 is a fact. SDS-40 flooding the streets with tens of thousands of repeat offenders is a fact. The public arming themselves, forming patrols, and abandoning trust in institutions? That's reality. And pretending otherwise is not just dishonest, it's dangerous. Because when leadership refuses to act, refuses to speak plainly, and refuses to face the truth, it's not just policy that collapses. It's legitimacy. And once that's gone, everything else follows. Law, order, unity, democracy. So if they won't say it, we will. This is not just a crisis. This is a reckoning. A reckoning with years of political neglect. A reckoning with broken systems and misplaced priorities. A reckoning with the lie that Britain is still functioning the way it used to. It's not, and everyone knows it. So now the question is, what comes next? More silence? More censorship? More failed policies dressed up as bold reform? Or will someone finally step up, admit the scale of the disaster, and do what needs to be done, without spin, without euphemism, and without delay? Because the clock's not ticking anymore. It's already hit zero. And every second of inaction from here on out is just another second lost to chaos, to fear, to a future where normal is defined by machetes, mistrust, and makeshift justice. So speak up, comment below. If you've seen it happening, say it. If you're done with the silence, share this. If you're holding on to even a shred of belief that this country can still be saved, like the video. Subscribe if you refuse to look away. Because the meltdown is real. And the world needs to see it, before there's nothing left to see.